Right. Hello. Okay. Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you for coming to listen to my presentation. My name is David Altimira. I'm doing a PhD here in HITLab. And today I'm going to present my research about exergaming. Exergaming is basically Sinclair that defines in his dissertation the combination of physical exercise and digital games. And the title of my project is Designing Engaging Non-Parallel Exertion Games Through Play Balancing. Basically here there are different elements in here that, as I said, my research is based on exertion games, games that promote physical activity. I'm focusing on non-parallel games, that are those games that the performance of one player influence the other player, like table tennis, what you do influence what the other player is doing. And the aim of the PhD is how to make engaging games, this type of games. And my approach is through play balancing. Before going to the details about what I did, then the question is why we want to research exertion games. Well, everybody knows that nowadays there is a problem of obesity. Here there is a map that shows from the countries that has been taken data that yes, people are getting obese, and there are many reasons but one of the reasons is the lack of physical activity. Then the question is how we can motivate people to do physical activity. Okay, then is when exertion games come to play. Exertion games, as I said, it's combine digital games with physical activity, because science games supposed to be fun, and people usually play games, and it is so that if we combine the physical activity in games, people will enjoy more doing physical activity. Then, in principle, combining these two elements, we will be able to encourage people to do more physical activity. In this slide, I would like to explain the main research focus and my expected contribution of this PhD. As I say, I'm focused on non-parallel games, games that the performance of one player influence the other. Particularly, I like sports, like table tennis. That is how I started doing the research in this sport. Social games that play by more than one player. Competitive, so that different players compete against each other for a particular goal, for example, to win a game. And my approach is through play balancing. That is how, for example, in order to different players with different skill levels and abilities can play together, feel challenged, and equalize a chance of winning. Then in this case, I will explain later on, but the main idea is to see different adjustments that you can apply in a game so that equalize the chance of winning, for example, and in different game worlds, for example, in virtual, for example, in Wii, or table tennis, or in augmented world. During the idea of this PhD is to develop 3 case studies that I will evaluate different game adjustments, evaluate the player experience, how well each adjustment helps in equalize the chance of winning. From these studies, develop game design themes and strategies so that help designers to design this type of games. And at the end, the aim of the PhD is to develop a framework that from all these insights and all this space of balancing adjustments that will help game designers to design this type of games to make it more engaging through play balancing. Okay, now let's go a little bit back in time. Why I decided to research this type of games? And the first question that came to my mind is, well, how we can, that I said, oh, your game is interesting. And the first thing that I thought is like, well, how we can design exertion games that are engaging. And first, I look a little bit at literature review. First, the big theories about the human needs, why the people motivated to do things. For example, we have theory of self-determination, Deci and Ryan, that explain that people have a need for relate with other people, or to master a challenge. Then there is also the flow theory that from the psychology Mihaly that explains that in order to get the optimal experience, needs to balance the skill and the challenge. And some researchers have applied these theories and have studied how we can apply these theories in the context of games and try to explain why we play these games. For example, Lathero in 2005, I think, that developed 4K elements that explains why people play games. And she explains that the challenge and the social play. And Malone, a little bit more back in time, also explained the challenge is important. And looking at the literature, there are two elements that seems to be quite important, that is the challenge and the social play. People usually like to feel challenged, and that is what is the main reasons why we play games, and what creates meaningful play, according to Stalin and German, because the challenge is makes that the outcome is unpredictable, and this is what creates a meaningful play. But also we like social play. We like play with others. We like to share the experience. Also, we can see the framework of Boyda that explains how we like to share the experience and develop some guidelines in order to develop social play. And all these research motivate me to study play balancing. This because in some way it combines these two elements. Play balancing can allow to different players to play together and enjoy together, even if they have different skill levels. It might allow people feel challenged even though they have different fitness or different. And I thought that it was a good approach in order to understand how we can design this type of games, in order to make them more engaging games. First, I would like to talk about what is play balancing. Well, play balancing, if you look at the book of Rollins, it says, well, there is not a unique definition, because the play balancing can be quite subjective and depends on type of games. For example, if you an adventure games, you will say, well, it's balanced if there is a smooth difficulty progression from easy to hard. Or in Warcraft, for example, or StarCraft, when there is strategy games, you might think that play balance is when you give the same resource to all the armies, so that there is no army that is better than the others. Or a table tennis game, that maybe you can think play balance is when you equalize the chance of winning. Molala also, when he did Jogging Over a Distance, that's the first picture, focus on play balancing on how aiming to challenge the players. My definition of play balancing is in the context of sports and in exertion games would be those game adjustments or mechanisms that allow different players with different skill levels and abilities play together, feel challenged, and equalize the chance of winning. Okay, what do we know about play balancing? Well, it's not something new. That has already been some research about play balancing. For example, Muller developed a framework in 2012 on, even if it's in the context of exertion games, you can apply it into other areas that he defined the 4 dimensions. The balancing can be defined according to the measure, what is measured, for example, the physical effort of the performance in non-physical games. You can have the control, who is the control, the designer or the user, or the presentation if it's explicit or implicit. And then there's a 4 dimension, that is the adjustment, that is what I will focus, because it's what basically my PhD is about. In adjustment, Muller said that, well, there is a static and dynamic. But then the question is, okay, what do you adjust in order to make a balance, in order to balance a play? If we look in non-physical games, Adams defined what the elements that compose the game difficulty. For example, when you play a game, how you perceive the difficulty depends on these 4 elements: your experience, the intrinsic skills required, that is, if you are in a fighting game, how strong is the enemy as influence, and how the stress placed in terms of time, how much time pressure, or the power provided. If you have a virtual character, how strong is your character is. Then the first thing I did is how that translates in the field of exertion games, because this is a perception of difficulty that we can take these 4 elements to understand what can we manipulate in order to adjust the balancing. What is in the case of exertion games? Then I look at some theory in sports. For example, Jackson in the Flow in Sports book defines that there are basically in sports 2 types of challenge: physical and mental. The physical, there are the physical skills, physical capacity, or physical effort, the mental effort, mental skills. So that there is a different challenge in the activities that require physical effort. And then there is the you can see that this is our external element, so that what the game or external things that you face in a task. For example, climbing a mountain, a challenge depends on the mountain, is some environment influence the challenge you perceive. And then Alderman define what is the performance in a sport, what determines your performance. That is more related to what your skills. And he explained that the physical endowment, how tall, how strong, your physical skills, your physical fitness, your psychology dimensions, how mental prepared you are. And then basically these 2 elements, probably I derived it from these 2 elements. The game, from these elements from challenge and performance, that have what the elements of the difficulty performance in exertion games. We can see here, for example, here we saw in the non-physical games, and here in the physical, and this is like kind of a diagram. This translates to the physical games. Here you can see that this is contextualized in a 2-player experience or in a social experience. The in-game experience I translate to what Alderman called the performance of the player. What is your fitness, your physical skills, your physical endowment, and how mental prepared you are. And this, the external elements from non-physical games, intrinsic skill required and power provided, I translate to these other, I call now dimensions, that is the challenge that comes from the environment. For example, the size of the table tennis, for example, or the power, the score, or since here I'm talking about social play, the challenge comes also from how good is the other player, how the skills of the other player. And these form what is intrinsic mental skill required, physical fitness required, that see that this is a little bit more complex from what we have in non-physical games, that in non-physical games there was basically intrinsic skill required. And here I translated to all of these that come from the challenge and how good you are. And this basically I take this and how this form the elements that influence your perception of difficulty, so that this can help to understand how we can adjust an exertion game. For example, you can adjust an exertion game by modifying the physical skills of the player, modifying the environment, or modifying the other player, the skills of the other player. And here is from that I defined my three case studies that I would like to develop during this PhD. In the first one that I already finished, I basically evaluate the adjustment for the more skilled player. For example, I asked him to play with the non-dominant hand so that I modify the skills of that player. And another condition, I I give to the other player a score advantage. I did that in different game worlds, and Wii and table tennis. Then, in order to start continue exploring this design adjustment space, in the case study that I hope to start doing in 3 weeks or so, I would like to explore environment adjustment. For example, here I would like to change the different size of table tennis rackets that change the user interface, or change the size of table tennis table. So that change the environment, and this whole change, how that is changed because of the change of the environment. And then I also like to explore how the static and dynamic adjustment, what's the difference, what's the difference in the player experience in one or the other adjustment. And then the third case study, I would like to again how we can adjust the skills of the one player, making one player be better. See how that can help in the how that can help in understand the player experience in different game adjustments. Here we can see all the big picture, the game design space of adjustments and which case studies I will develop. And what I will evaluate is, for example, how these game adjustments influence the game score of the players, or the engagement of the players, how they feel challenged, the perception of fairness, and the social play. And try to understand how the interrelation between these elements. Now here I will present a little bit the results of the first case study. I will not explain all the exact details of the results because I have to keep it short, but the first case study, I evaluate the different game conditions. One condition is without no adjustment, another condition is playing with the non-dominant hand, the more skilled player, affecting the skills of the player, and the other affecting the game score. In 2 different game worlds, in table tennis or in Wii. And the results I got that, I derived that with to 5 design themes. Now we name that, maybe, let's see if I change the name, but basically it's like this, summarize a little bit the findings. Basically, the first, to go quickly in the 5 design themes, the first one is that I found that, for example, O'Brien, the model of engagement, defines engagement as the different different stages. There is a point of engagement, there is engagement process, and different attributes can go from one stage to the other. And then I found that different game balancing adjustments can influence differently to these different stages. For example, some players playing with a score disadvantage, they feel maybe very unfair, and they seem never been into the game, so that this kind of adjustment probably can influence the point of engagement. Playing with a non-dominant hand, some players maybe feel engaged, but because of the usability, they disengage, so that it changes in which stage. That is why I put these game design themes, things that the game designers should think about how game adjustments influence in different stages. The second, and quality of the challenge, because here, for example, in table tennis, playing with the non-dominant hand, with the more skilled player, when he or she had to play with the non-dominant hand, equalize the chance of winning, challenge this player, but this player feels disengaged, so that sometimes it is said, the more challenge, the better. Well, the more challenge, even if it equalizes the chance of winning, it might disengage. Then it's important to be aware of this kind of things. Related to the second one is design for the social play. Even though I didn't get into very details on evaluate the social play, I realized that when the players play with a non-dominant hand, they had to focus more on the control. And this influenced the amount of errors, for example, or also the observation about the other player, or like because they had put so many troubles in controlling the hand. And this, I think, that influenced the the social play. For example, it's Pfister in the studies of social play says that it's important to know the observer player on the communication, and when you adjust, if you somehow influence negative or that, this can explain why some game adjustments are disengaged than others. The fourth one, the global experience of play balancing, I named that because game adjustments influence differently for the more skilled and the less skilled player. The less skilled player feels less challenged because he or she plays with an advantage, and the other way around with the other player. He fell with them. And that is why it's something that you should take into account when you design an adjustment that you can influence differently, and you can have some problems because you basically want all the players, engage all the players to the challenge. And the last one, the role of the game control and play balancing, is that I found differences on how different game adjustments influence the real world and the virtual world. Bianchi Bertuzzi explained that in her studies in the role of body motion in engagement, says that in the Wii games the rules are simplified compared into the real world like table tennis in order to make the game more accessible. This also has some implication of the game adjustments. For example, in performance handicap, if you ask the player to play with a non-dominant hand, this has less impact than that, so that the suitability of a game balancing adjustment can be different depending on which game goal you are focusing. This is something that when designing adjustments in play balancing, designers should take into account how you interfere with the game. Well, basically, now I'm finishing what has been done. I design, develop, and conduct the first case study, and design and implement the second case study. And I hope in 3 weeks I finish the setup and can conduct the experiment. This is basically a future work. Finish the second study, conduct the experiment, and then do a third case study, and finally develop the final framework. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you. And if you have any questions, suggestions, everything will come.
Do you know the difference between game and play? And if so, why did you pick play balancing and not game balancing?
Well,
are you aware of the difference between play and game?
Game basically is when it's more goal oriented, and but I guess that play balancing is probably the generic term of adjustments you can apply in any play or game context. Even though I focus in sports, that also is a specific type of game, because here I focus in sports. But play balancing adjustment is. I'm not sure that if when you apply any adjustment, if the thing that you have a goal or not. Yes, probably a good question. I haven't thought very much about it, but I said play balancing probably because the generic work of different adjustments when there is a play context, for example, in a game or in a sport. But I have to think about if that can be applied to all type of plays, or only specific in games that are more goal-oriented. Yeah, probably.
Just take a look at playing a game and make sure you refer to the one you want to refer to.
Thanks.
Yeah. What kind of users would be interested in the regular use of this kind of system?
Well, I think that is quite important, the type of user, because probably depending on the scenario, if you are more competitive, like tournament, can be different, or the perception of fairness. In this case, I'm taking users that even though they compete, but it's kind of more fun competition that is not big thing involved. Because probably it's more the insights are with this type of user probably will be more helpful because in a competition or in a tournament, probably there are not applied so much game balancing on that. And my criteria in choosing the users I follow is like I try before doing the experiments I ask the user for the using a question. They rate the level of expertise, and based on that, I match the user so that they have as much different level of expertise as possible. Because I'm interested if both users have the same level of expertise, well, maybe it's not so much interesting because then the question is why you want to use play balancing there. But yeah, the criteria I follow is just choose kind of random users that try to make them to have large.
Yeah, because I'm thinking a little bit about the justification that you give for this project that very much is about obesity in order to give a solution for obesity in general. But I think that, well, first thing, I consider that your project is definitely a user-centered design study. So in this way, you choose the features of your users, and the features of your system are based in the features of the users. So I think that people who is obese, I mean, that we are obese, we have a sort of personality and a sort of attitude towards the challenges, right? So many people is obese because they are sedentary people. So in this sense, did you consider motivation as a factor of your study? Because I guess it's one of the main factors in order to motivate people to use this kind of systems. Because probably
you suggest that maybe you would be more interested to choose people that tend to be obese or something like that?
Well, I don't know exactly because the main fact that you mentioned in your presentation was that one of the facts that you developed this system is because people was obese in the world. So your system could offer a solution for this problem. But the problem of obesity is a quite complex problem.
I guess that the main idea is that try to make people like more exercise. People to, in general, obese, not obese, and maybe to change their habits. And if you will create physical sports or physical exercise that are more enjoyable, that in theory will tend to people, obese or not obese, tend to play more.
Yeah,
and probably is the play balancing is quite helpful because well, what you say with obese or not obese people in physical exercise, probably the obese people probably can have a little bit disadvantage from fit people. So that if you want to make these people enjoy, probably you would like to apply the kind of game mechanism so that if you want to go running and you go to Usain Bolt, for example, no? Well, then you can run with him because he has very good fitness, no?
Yeah,
But yeah.
The thing that I'm saying is that you, in my opinion, it's just an opinion, you couldn't be general. You cannot generalize the use of this system for all the users that possibly you can find along the study. Specifically because this fact about obesity, it was one of the facts, one of the facts which was more emphasized in the presentation. So, and the things that I'm saying that, and I'm assuming that personality of obese people is different than active people because that's the reason that you are obese. As well, there are other factors, feeding, personality, culture, many factors. So I think that the system and the idea is quite good, but I guess there are a sort of weakness in the justification. Talking about obesity, as one of the factors that could justify this project. I don't know if it makes sense.
So I kind of add to Barbara's comment that having a slide of obesity as a motivation for researching extra gaming makes sense, but you would need another slide that you justify why you are focusing on play balancing with extra gaming theme. So maybe better to have a slide that many people give up playing games because of they don't feel balanced or something. So I think that will make that solid. The other comment I had was, since you are quite focusing on play balancing with sports games, I don't see that much components having advantage of digital gaming itself. So the play balancing you're designing now is actually not specifically related to extra game, which you first mentioned that exercise plus digital game, but for now it looks like it could be applied for any kinds of game. It just the methods you've suggested for play balancing kind of doesn't look like it's specific for designed for digital games, but whether it could be applied to any kinds of games. So I think if you add some kind of component that's specific to digital games, and then that might add a bit more.
Well, I guess that the idea is that during these three case studies, yeah, it's true that the first one, I studied table tennis that without any component of digital, but I compare. My idea is also to compare with different game worlds from the taxonomy that is kind of a real world, virtual world, and augmented, and also to see the opportunities of each game world brings to game balancing. For example, in real world, you don't have any digital component. Then, well, then you might be more constrained on that and see. For example, when you augment, for example, what I'm doing with limiting the size of table tennis, adding digital content to add the boundaries. Well, how opportunities of adding digital content has to game balancing also, or this is what is considered augmented world, not because you augment digital technology on the real one.
So my comment is you design the play balancing vectors, maybe might be good if you can come up with something that's unique for digital gaming. So that since if you don't have the component, it's no difference between researching, investigating play balancing in a sports research center to human-based technology research center. So I think you might have to focus on give a little more emphasis on using or exploiting digital components.
You mean that, for example, from now on I should, from the different focus on game one game world, for example, augmented world. So that
no, I don't mean you have to focus on one game, but the design components you or design guidelines you've derived out might be good if it could be benefit by using these components, which might not be possible without. And the other thing with when you were reporting the first user study, first case study, I think. So this slide is for your interim report.
Yeah, this is the kind of the final outcomes, or one of the final outcomes of the results of the first case study.
I think you should add a little bit more about how you did the experiment. So it seems you were just outlining the results. Of course, I believe it's because of the time interest, but it might be better to show you what you've done so far, rather than just summing up into points.
Yeah,
That looks like a bit.
Yeah, I wanted to put more, but yeah, well, actually, it took maybe 20 minutes, 22, and I've been told maybe to do it in 15 if I have to constrain time. But yeah, I have to think about
It doesn't, I mean, to me, it doesn't look like it's showing all the things you've done, but it's like kind of only showing the last slide of your.
Yeah, because the problem, I guess, is that I don't want to enter very details into the design of the experiment because that might take 10 minutes more to explain all the results and everything, and then the final. But I don't know how to, because I would like to present some of the results of the first case study, but without having to enter into details, all the process of the first case study or the statistical analysis or all this kind of stuff. Because.
But I guess this is a strong part of your work because you have been working so much in this part of your study. I thought you were working on that. You put so much effort in that, and I guess it's the main thing that you can show in your next presentation.
And what do you suggest?
Yeah, the same thing that the gun show the results, the methods, the hypothesis and research question about your previous user study that you did with the ping pong and the Wii and the. In fact, I participated in your study, so.
Yeah, even like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
pictures that you took from the user study, or even like instead of just showing this list of bullet points for a couple of minutes, just show the list first, and then you break each bullet point into another page of slides. Of course, you shouldn't spend too much time for each slides, but like as you've explained each bullet point here for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Then you can split it to 5 slides, spending 1 minute for each slide.
Or maybe if there is constraint time, what I can do is focus on maybe 1, 2, or 3, put the picture and try to emphasize the one that maybe is more relevant. Or
just a from presenting your work.
Thank you.
To be honest, this slide seems to me like a list of passwords. So I don't really see any results here, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would have to explain the quality of the challenge. It's a very general phrase.
Yeah.
So you might consider like making it more specific.
Thank you.
One last question.
Yeah.
You said 3 methods of game balancing or play balancing was power, the environment, or the third one, the embodied adjustment opponent. How would you do the third one? That was not really clear to me. How would you like to change the strength of the opponent?
Well, this is basically it's from the point of view of one player.
Yes.
That you have the challenge, what the challenge, and one of the challenge, it depends on the game difficulties, how good the other opponent is. And well, you can always, if you want to change the embodied adjustments, for example, the fitness, physical skills, for example, playing with a non-dominant hand, like try to change how the other players play. For example, you probably are worse with a non-dominant hand than your good hand. And this is one way. Or well, actually affecting this part, the environment, and this is probably the easiest part because. But I guess that you can also change this.
So playing with the other hand is a very good example, I think, to demonstrate this adjustment. You might want to give also examples for doing it in the virtual world.
And that's maybe is related with what you said. This probably when doing in the real world, this is super challenge because there are not many options. Well, you can play with an dominant hand, but not many things you can do. And then that is probably what entering into the digital world can help on that. For example, in Mueller's, the developer application that is this one. This is the first picture. It's called jogging over a distance, where he tried to make the people with different fitness levels to jog together, and he used the target heart rate with the current heart rate and using spatial audio in order to kind of balance in the virtual world so that people can jog at different places, even if they have different fitness level, because he may measure not the how fast but or how much each player ran, but the effort, that is your heart rate compared your target one. And this kind of, in a way, a strategy of adjusting the fitness level, probably, because it's like you just not the fitness level itself of the player, but into the virtual context. No? That the virtual players have similar fitness level, even though because you cannot change very much of your body. You can break your leg or something. But probably that is maybe opportunities of what the digital world can bring into game adjustment, and probably things that we can explore.
You should definitely say that.
And by the way, coming back to the diagram, so you've mentioned about making the opponent to play with the other hand. I think that's actually has to be mapped to the right side phrase rather than the left side. So when you've mentioned about your first case study, you put a rectangle on power and the anxiety of the player.
Well, I get,
but it sounds like it seems like more that you've actually controlled the in-body adjustment of the opponent rather than the.
Well, I guess that probably this depends on here the focus of this player. If you consider the player is the more skilled, then you affect that, or you consider this player and then because probably when you game adjustment you can see from 2 point of views. What is and this is what is the challenge for the player, and this would be the same circle involving this.
So I understand it can be interchangeable, but as an audience, it sounded more like you actually did was actually change the body adjustment for the opponents rather than the player you're focusing. So might have a little bit as the other body adjustment can actually due to the player focusing. I think it's just drugging.
What?
Giving drugs.
Or like it's really easy, like if we are in virtual world, for example, playing ping pong, like let's say that they have like 100% accuracy each one, but you can reduce the other player's accuracy, for example, and then you have kind of like it's a unbalanced situation in that sense.
In the third case of study, because probably it's easy to make one player worse. But what I would like to think about how to make one player better, because here in the first case study, that basically the game adjustment didn't increase the engagement, but because when you put troubles, you might influence not only what I mentioned, the social play, but maybe it's also influenced because of the perception of fairness, or simple because players don't want to be limited; they want to play, and I guess that it will be interesting to see if instead of that you focus on the other side, try to make the other player better. Probably the social play, the challenge, the engagement, probably would influence positively. But now it's difficult to see. Well, I can ask the participant to take drugs, but I don't know if the ethics committee will accept that. Thank you.